Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about interviews. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, why is it that so many senior developers hate coding interviews? And what would be the alternative that you would like to propose which will replace the current interview process? Well, so usually the reason why senior developers hate the coding interview is because it's basically homework. Most companies, well, either they give you something very challenging to work on, or like I've been guys have gotten code test that it will take a fucking week. Literally will take a week to do it well. And no one wants to, and it's basically just unpaid stress. At least for me it is. I like to say that to the guys and girls that I interview for the company I was working for, because I know that they're nervous, and they sometimes they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm very nervous," and I try to put on the biggest smile I have and be super warm and super welcoming and so forth, and tell them that you don't have to worry. I was nervous as well. I've been working for a few years now, and I was still as nervous as you were. I promise you. Like, I couldn't get all the answers right, and I sent in my code test 8 times. I did, because I was really, really insecure about like the work, and I still like know that it's not bad. It's just you get these gremlins in your head and so forth and so forth, and so all of that is sort of. Especially for the ones when you've been doing this for years and years and years, it starts getting a little bit tedious that you have to prove it over and over. You have to, because it's as I like to say, the meaning of senior, or the meaning of any of this stuff, is very relative. I've interviewed people who have been working for as many years as I have, but they're not going to be able to work in a specific company because they don't really have the same sort of experience, because the differences that what you've been doing, and like the differences in tooling and your skill levels and so forth, they are so wide. There's such a slope on all of this stuff, like our gaps, peaks and gaps and so forth, that you have to do some type of evaluation. There's no way for you to just say, no, actually we're just gonna cut it off at if you've been working for 8 years, then you're good. Because I can promise you guys, you're not good just because you've done it for 8 years. I've met plenty of software developers who are, I would not call them seniors, and not in the slightest, at least not by the definitions used by the companies that I've worked for. So what do you do? Well, the thing that I usually tell people, I haven't had a chance, honestly, to, I hope that I can get that chance at some point, but uh, I've been trying to sell this idea that the goal of any interview is to get an understanding of what level of a software developer are you dealing with, because what you're trying to assert is, where should I put the pay level and the responsibility level for this individual. And those things that usually the way that I categorize, and this is my personal categorization now, guys, this is just my own value system, is junior, mid-level, and senior. These are the 3 levels. If you are a junior level, that means that you need assistance from someone with more experience. In other words, you are very unlikely to be able to work completely autonomously and just produce value if left alone. You're probably going to need pair programming, sessions, someone to mentor you, etc., etc. You are a little bit of an investment. Then you have mid-levels, and mid-levels don't necessarily have to know everything about all the tools and have like a real deep understanding of everything and so forth, but they need to know enough about the tooling and the ways of working so that you can give them a task and not have to check in on them every 5 minutes to see if they made any progress. They will finish the task, within reason of course, without taking away too much time from someone who is someone else, or like a senior or something like that. They can basically work independently if needed, because that's at the end of the day what you're going for. You're trying to offload work to an individual, and if that individual can't do that, it's very difficult to keep them around because they're adding work. There are of course nuances and so forth, but that's the general general thing. And then of course the last thing is a senior, and a senior should be an individual who basically you can give the responsibility of just making sure that the entire team works. They are the people who are experienced enough that they know how to set up the work processes, they know how to coach the rest of the team if they need coaching, they know how to figure out if something tricky happens, like there's a latency issue or there's a bug in production or so forth and so forth. They have all the experience necessary to basically run the team if necessary. And if you have such an individual, you know that the products is in good hands, you're going to get a decent level of quality, you're going to get decent level of results from, and so forth and so forth. These are usually the levels, and the thing about that, which is very interesting, is that you don't really need a very extreme coding challenge to figure this stuff out. So what I usually propose to people is that the coding test bit, it should be there, but the goal is not to create something where you're trying to figure out, is this a senior, is it a junior, is it whatever. Like, you're trying to figure out, can this person code well enough that it's worth my time to do an interview with them, because it is in the interview when you talk to people where you actually figure out whether they're good or bad in terms of knowledge at the very least. So you want a sample size of code that is just large enough so that you can figure out, does this person even knows the basics. A classic one is that you give, if you take a front-end developer for example, instead of creating a sophisticated super algorithm or something like that, create a simple application challenge where they have to make a mobile first something in a web page. It doesn't take more than, say, an hour or two at most, and see if they can produce it. You will be surprised, guys, at how often I just give people where I check code tests where like they can't actually do that. They can't produce a mobile first application. Then that's not an interesting person for me to talk to at all, because they literally that is below a junior level software developer in terms of at least what the current company that I work for has need for. And so once you have that small challenge, it doesn't, as I said, have to be very complicated. It just has to assert that this person knows the basics of software development. Then you can take them to the interview, and then you ask them about their experiences. This is what I do now, for example, where my job, one of my responsibilities is, it is literally to sit in interviews and ask people all kinds of different questions related to tooling, to practices and things like that. We don't go like graph searching algorithms or Fibonacci algorithms or things like that usually with these people. We just try to figure out where is your experience level. And you can hear that, as I've said this many times before, guys, if you listen to me talk about my experiences with software development, I hope now that you will hear a difference in the way that I speak from, say, someone who is, you know, just starting out. If you ask me about like how do I think about unit testing versus, say, your like a college graduate or something like that, you're going to hear the answer differs in depth and sort of understanding, let's call it that, right? It's the same thing when you interview people, and by doing this you basically reduce down the amount of upfront investment for the seniors, because the thing is, I can't just take the interview immediately with everybody, because basically that means that I have to interview everybody. That takes a lot of time, the interview itself. So if you can just give someone a very simple coding challenge, get them to the interview stage, then you can assert if it's worth continuing or not. If you want to, you can stop there, because if you have a really good someone who can evaluate effectively, you don't really have to go further than that, because the reality is, as I've said to many companies, you should never make a big investment on a software developer until you've seen them work for at least around 6 months or something like that, like the grace period, as we call it here in Scandinavia. The reason being because even if they know everything, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are productive when they get into the work environment. Guys, I've interviewed many developers who are like, they know all the frameworks, they know all the practices, they know all the terms, they sound really smart and really good and so forth, but then they start working and it turns out that they can't work in the code base. They can't do anything without a lot of assistance, or they can't, they take like 5 times as long as everybody else to figure even the basic stuff out. They don't really have the knack for it, if that makes sense, when it comes to actually delivering. And so that's why I tell people you can have an optional last thing, which is to give them a more like in-depth challenge that actually reflects the sort of work they're going to do in the, I've made videos about that as well, which is like a coding challenge where they actually get to code a small application using the exact same tools ideally as they're going to use in the role, and then you can walk through with them, or you can do pair programming with them on this session if you want to just see how do they work, like how do they think when they're on the job. Sometimes I don't like to suggest pair programming because it's people are nervous and take-home challenges can be easier and so forth. I leave that unsaid because there are pros and cons with each of them, but at the very least this is a core thing that I would change with the approach we have today. So what I want you to take away from this is that most seniors feel that they're getting homework, or like they don't want to spend extra time coding just to prove that they can do a job. Usually they are more comfortable just getting to the interview as quickly as possible. So I tell some companies, if you have someone who really knows their stuff, you can skip the code test. You don't have to put it first. You can just do the interview, because usually you can tell if somebody's worth your time if you're looking for seniors by just talking to them. But then you also require someone who really knows their stuff to do the interview, because otherwise you're not gonna get much from it. Another approach which I think is a little bit nicer is, which is my personal one, which is to have a very small code challenge, something that is not all that sophisticated, that they can do, they can take home. It basically just, this is there to assert you know how to produce software at least a junior level, because that's just the thing that is beautiful about that. A junior, as just with the experience, a junior will just barely pass and make the thing that is needed. The more advanced software developers might add more things to the solution that sort of gives you an indicator that, yeah, actually this person was thinking about testing, this person was thinking about this and that and so forth. So it's like getting, you get a passing grade versus an A+ grade, but the challenge is still very small, very simple, so that the investment up front for a new candidate is very low, because the thing is, you want them to apply, you want them to be hired, but you need to assert that they're good enough. And so the goal is not to give them a lot of work to prove that they should even get to the interview. It's about getting enough sample of code so you can tell, yeah, this is worth an interview, yes or no. That's what you're going for, and then figure out their experience level once you're actually talking to them. Have a great day.